Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So we missed last week.
Yeah, explain yourself, sir.
You explain yourself first, because you took the time off.
Well, you weren't going to be here either. What the fuck are you talking about?
I had real life things to do.
So I had internet problem. You had real life reasons, so you weren't going to be here. So we were just going to do me and Morgan. About an hour or two before recording, I realized my computer is just not connecting to the internet. And, I try resetting the router, turn my internet on and off on my computer. Can't figure it out. And then eventually I realized many hours later that I just needed to restart my computer. That apparently is what eventually fixed the problem. So I tried everything else except rebooting my computer. And so I had internet issues last week and could not connect. So recording, I tried to solve it for hours. I just didn't try the obvious thing, right?
It's fine because Seth messaged me. He's like, I'm having internet problems. And I was like, oh shit, that was today? Because I hadn't even read the chapter.
So all three of us failed to appear at last week's recordings for various reasons.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I've been all caught up in doing like massive editing for like the show. I forgot my therapy appointment like the week before last. I was like the hour afterwards and I'm like, oops. Send her a text message like, sorry, I lost track of the time. I feel stupid. Yeah.
Well, and it's not surprising that we got caught up and lost time in the middle of Perrin's storyline as he's trying to rescue Fael. For some reason, it always drags on longer than you think it's going to. Speaking of, did you like that segue?
Yes, I did.
So, speaking of...
This is an exciting Perrin chapter.
It is.
Where it finally gets interesting.
This is what must be done, and apparently what must be done is you gotta throw your axe away.
Or you just gotta chop people's hands off.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Chop their hands off and then throw it away.
Just one.
Yeah, but we have Morgan today with us because this is an intense chapter, and Morgan likes to talk about the weird, intense stuff. So, yet again, thank you so much, Morgan, for coming to our podcast.
You're welcome.
And yeah, this is a not a slaggy chapter.
No.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. This is worthy of making an ebook cover.
Right. This is an ebook cover chapter, which is not the same as a print book cover chapter, because print book cover chapters can still be boring as hell. Because those print book covers half the time aren't even a scene from the books necessarily.
Right, because they come from like really early on in the publishing process rather than the ebook, which tends to be maybe a little later, particularly with Robert Jordan stuff.
Right, after the book's been written and published for several years, yeah. I guess I should read us in, shouldn't I?
It's a Perrin chapter.
It is a Perrin chapter. Oh, and the chapter header is a wolf.
Ow!
Oh, we didn't even plan that in time in sync wooing. That was completely organic.
That was awesome.
The winnowing took place on the snowy eastern riverbank, where there was nothing to cut the sharp north wind. Men and women from the town hauled sacks across the bridges in 4-horse wagons and 1-horse carts, even barrows pushed by hand. Normally, buyers brought their own wagons to the warehouses, or at worst, the grain and dried beans only had to be carried as far as the wharf. But Perrin had no intention of sending his cart drivers into So Harbor, or anyone else for that matter. Whatever was wrong in that town might be catching. Anyway, the drivers were uneasy enough as it was, frowning at the dirty townsfolk, people who never spoke, but laughed nervously when they accidentally met someone's eye. The grimy-faced merchants overseeing the work were no better. In the driver's native Kyrian, merchants were clean, respectable people, at least outwardly, who very seldom twitched just because someone moved at the corner of their vision. Between merchants with a tendency to peer suspiciously at anyone they did not know, and townsfolk who dragged at their feet, recrossing the bridges, clearly reluctant to go back inside their own walls, the court drivers were right on edge. They gathered in little clusters, pale, dark-clad men and women, gripping the hilts of their belt knives and peering at the taller locals as if at murderous madmen. Perrin rode slowly, watching the winnowing, examining the rows of carts that stretched up the rise and out of sight, waiting to be loaded, or the town's wagons and carts and barrows rolling across the bridges. He made sure he was in plain view. He was not sure why the sight of him pretending to be unconcerned should settle anyone else's nerves, yet it seemed to. Enough that no one started running, at least, though they continued to look askance at the people of So Harbor. They kept their distance too, and just as well. Let the notion that some of these folk not be alive get into the Kyrianans' heads, and half would whip up their cart horse to flee, then and there. Most of the rest might not wait much past dark. That sort of tale could twist anyone's head come night. The wan sun, nearly hidden by gray overcast, still sat less than halfway to its noonday peak, yet increasingly it was obvious that they would have to be there through the night. Maybe more than one. His jaw knotted with the effort of not grinding his teeth, and even Niald began to avoid his scowls. He did not snap at anyone, he just wanted to.
Yeah.
So I think that's enough to set us up for, remember what we're doing in So Harbor. We're winnowing all the vermin-filled, weevil-filled grain and beans, and So Harbor's dirty and gross, and they want to get out of there. But it's going to take, I think it ends up taking, 3 days?
Yeah, the end of the chapter, it's a time jump of 3 days. Yeah, the thing I think that's really notable about this section is the part where he's starting to understand the steps of leadership, even though he doesn't understand the underlying reasons. It's one of those, he's starting to get it, but then it takes him way too long to, finish getting it. But here's him starting to get it. He's starting to understand that if he rides around looking unconcerned, he's managing his people effectively. He doesn't get why, but he gets to do it. And I wish that he, had those revelations every now and then, periodically, rather than, 3 times in the entire arc. But, it's one of those moments.
Yeah, it's, I always feel bad for him because I'm one of those people who, I could just imagine being there and, needing to have a book to read or wanting to scroll on the phone or something, just having to sit there and look, important. I would just die of boredom. I'd need to be able to be busy or, it just seems like in our more bureaucratic system where everything is set up in such a way where a person in charge at least has paperwork or something to do. There's something on your desk. You have a system set up where you can pass work off to other people, delegate tasks. Either he doesn't know how to do that or else there's just not a system set up for him to have enough stuff to do. And so I feel bad for him because it would be excruciating to be in his shoes.
Yeah. Well, I think Fail kind of was managing that for him, right? Because she understands how this stuff works, but without her there, he's...
Many years of training.
Yeah. I think that's probably why she was trying to train him to hold court and stuff, was for precisely that reason.
So he just has to be alone with his thoughts and feeling miserable and looking miserable.
And this is apparently So Harbor is on the larger tributaries of the Eldar River. One of the larger tributaries of the Eldar River. So it is a harbor, which is part of the reason it probably has so much grain built up in storage.
Yeah, it's like a river port instead of an ocean, harbor. And
I think we talked about it was an intersection, right? And
that's why it's the
crossroads of Twilight. Yeah.
Yeah. I just got that episode published today, edited it yesterday. So yes, you made that argument quite thoroughly in the last episode.
Excellent.
Came out last week.
Man, it is so weird to not. Sometimes it is difficult to know if I made an argument already or not. I just don't remember if I said it.
No, that's super real.
It's surprising how often you sit around thinking about things you want to say on the podcast, and then I go, wait, I don't know if I said that or not. So I just say it 3 or 4 times, and I assume you'll just delete it in editing.
Yeah. And then the next thing that happens is I try. And then the next thing that happens is a very long description of how winnowing works, the physics of it, the aesthetic of it, the fact that the snow is getting crunchy with weevils and just everything that you don't want to think about in terms of weevils. He's just grinding your nose into it, just being like, this is happening, and it's grungy and it's gross and time consuming, and half the volume of the product is getting blown away as weevils, and it takes almost 2 sacks to fill one. Like, it's a whole ridiculous, disgusting thing, and he spends paragraphs telling us about it.
I bet the birds are feasting on all those grubs.
Sure. Yeah, the birds are probably not doing too poorly. They're kind of like, not all species suffer from climate change, right? Like, some species are not suffering from the Dark One's touch on the world. And yeah, insectivore birds are one of those.
They're like,
that are
sweet,
benefiting.
more bugs.
Manna from heaven.
Right. Roaches are just pouring out of people. It's great.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that I really appreciate what he does as far as showing the foodstuffs and the problems that they have with it, because fears of starvation are always a reasonable thing that we as privileged people in privileged times, where we generally have access to food unless we're suffering from the cost of living so much that we're, a lot of people nowadays actually do struggle to find enough to eat. But being in a situation where the food is going bad and they're really having to think about the logistics of feeding their army, and now they're down to like oatmeal and acorns and all of this kind of stuff, where it's very gritty and just realistic as you're thinking about all of the nasty food that they have to eat, and they're getting to the point where they're not even picking the weevils out of their bread, and everything's rancid, but it's not so rancid you don't want to eat it, and it's very visceral, and I appreciate it even as it's terrible, because it just is sort of like, you thought it was a shit show, but it's more of a shit show now, and it's just getting worse and worse.
And there's something about eating the corruption and the rot and it feels like you're eating the Dark One's taint, right? Like, It really, that's I feel what he's doing here is, and I just realized how that sounded.
I wasn't gonna say that.
And yeah, no, but it feels like he has corrupted, and he's using his powers to add the corruption, as they say in the show, to the food, and that's what's causing the sort of overlap as the seals are breaking. This is Hinterstap. This is all the little spaces in the world, the bubbles of evil, that almost I feel like they're sinking into the land rather than just popping up and dissipating. Right now we have these areas where these bubbles of evil are popping up and settling in to stay.
I like that the Dark One is forcing the corruption into the bodies of all the people, not just male channelers. He's getting everyone by forcing them to eat this rotten food.
Yeah, day-to-day life. It's sort of like it used to be unfortunates like male channelers or people who chose to have the corruption because they wanted something from the Dark One, and now it's like everybody gets it. You can't avoid it. It's going to be in your food. It's going to show up in your town when dead people walk around everywhere. You can't. It's all falling apart.
Yeah, you're supposed to be safe from the Dark One in ways that are no longer true at this point in the series. And that's part of what sucks for the regular people who aren't demigods walking the earth, knowing they're in charge, right? This is normal people who are like, what's happening? I can't do anything.
The atmosphere of this town is so horrifying. Like, I remember reading in the beginning, because before you find out that the dead are walking everywhere, because you've already gotten glimpses of that before, you just know something's terribly wrong with the town and everybody's all freaking out. It's really quite haunting, and it's almost like it's like a little sinkhole where, the corruption is sinking in and you can't escape from it. And it's like the people are trapped there because they have nowhere to go. It's not like they're trapped in a Hinterstap way. It's just, where are they supposed to go? Their shit's there. They don't have a lord. The lord abandoned them, which Berylane talks about as she's angry because she assumes Perrin's guilty about the fact that they're just going to buy all their food and dip. And she's trying to comfort him and be like, don't feel bad. And he's like, does she think he feels guilty? I love that, the little passage where she's like, don't feel bad about it. It's the Lord's fault that he left them. And he's just sort of like, nah.
Yeah. I like the characterization of how she's angry at the absent Lord. Like, it's nice to have that, responsible nobility actually expressing outrage at an injustice. It is nice to see that, even if it is in the context of, but we have to cut them loose anyway, because it's not our circus, not our monkeys.
Yeah. And also the context of it's sort of like, Perrin with Fail would feel tremendous responsibility toward those people. But Perrin without Fail is just sort of like, you thought I felt guilty? I don't feel guilty. This look on my face is all of the other turmoil about everything. And he does turn his horse away so he doesn't have to look at like the poor children who are trying to deal with winnowing the food and, beating the vermin out of the sacks and everything, because he is affected by it, but like very minimally, because he is so focused on this one thing and he doesn't have room to care about very much else. And certainly not enough room to feel guilty about leaving all of these people in their hell city.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. If he had Fail with him and came across this town, he would feel very guilty about not breaking the curse somehow or taking them away or something. But without Fail, he can only try to get Fail back, and everything has to fall to that.
He would do something that the whole thing for Perrin would be, he would want to do something, and Fail and Barrelane would be like, this isn't your problem, and be trying to talk him out of it. But it's just like a drastic difference in the characterization of Perrin to show being so obsessed with her and everything that's going on, and just how he's so emotionally shut down to where, people, because Perrin cares so much about people, and how suddenly they just cease to matter in the face of this other thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's another echo of what must be done, right? Making impossible choices, because that is what must be done to achieve the goal.
I've been thinking a lot about how in a lot of fantasy, heroes are willing to sacrifice the good of the many for the good of the one, right? And Star Trek hammers on this over and over and over again, like the search for Spock, over and over and over again. The captains put the entire crew at risk to go rescue the one person. Because if you're on the crew, you're that one person, you want to be guaranteed somebody's coming after you.
Saving Private Ryan, right?
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, all of those, yeah. There's a ton of stuff like that where, yeah, we're going to go into a battle-torn war zone and risk everybody's lives because it's important to go for that one person. And I wonder if it's an interesting moral argument that's been hammered home over and over and over again in our stories, and I wonder how true it is. Whereas really, you got to look at the risk-benefit analysis, right?
I mean, I'm always sitting back and wondering at why people would agree to be part of a multiple 1,000-person army that's trying to rescue, like, one, I don't know, Helen of Troy, for example, right? Like, why would you do that? Like, as a normal person, like, I continue to not get it. And that's probably because I'm autistic, but...
Because you don't see one life as any more valuable than any others.
I don't do hierarchies. Like, I'm a no thank you to binaries anarchist. Like, I don't do hierarchies. But nonetheless, that is how humans work broadly, according to our storytelling. And I don't know if that's gaslighting everybody because that seems nonsensical, or if it just seems nonsensical to me because I don't do hierarchies. Like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Super realistic when you're part of an army, and especially in a situation like this where food sources are growing real limited and nobody knows really where to go anymore because everything's falling apart and it's chaos and anarchy. And so you have leadership and you're going to get a meal, even if it's a shitty meal of oatmeal and acorns. Everything kind of boils down to this very basic subsistence at this point. So you're going to go wherever your leadership takes you when you're part of this army, because at the time that the last battle is coming on, literally you pick up a spear or you pick up a sword because that's how you eat. And when you're a foot soldier, you're going to go where you're told to go, or you're going to walk away and starve or become a victim to larger numbers. And it's just real basic and real practical.
Yeah, I definitely am speaking from the place of privilege of not having to choose to join an army or starve. That is definitely influencing my stance for sure.
It becomes much more obvious in the later books when that's really like, well, the army's got food. That's why we're here. That's why, we'd be bandits, but even like the people we're robbing don't even have food. There's no food out there. Nobody's got it except these armies. So that's why it's really join or starve are your two options.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious later, but even he has Matt's character explore it fairly early on when he's talking about what you get paid depending upon what you can do. Like, if you're a pikeman, you get paid, a little bit, but if you can shoot a bow or ride a horse, you make a little bit more money. But it's like people don't become soldiers out of idealism for the most part. You do it because it's how you make money. And if you can live, you might make enough to, buy a farm. So, that's a great cover. What a good one, Pants. Excellent.
Love that. Yeah, we've actually got Perrin with an axe that has the chapter 27 is the blood smear on the axe.
And the hand lying on the ground next to him.
Yeah.
Charming expression on his face. I'm here for that. That looks great.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, so there's obviously lots of reasons why people join armies, but the whole going in to rescue one specific person at the risk of everyone else is something you think Perrin would wrestle with more, but because it's Fael, he doesn't.
So, on my continued quest to understand what the hell is going on with Honora, I was hoping, Morgan, you could help me. There's a quote here that says, where Berline's talking about Honora, and says, "She is not as forthcoming as she once was, as I once thought she was. It is up to her to mend what she has torn." With Honora standing right there, basically saying this to her. Like, what the hell did she tear? What trust did she betray? Like, what is going on between her and Berline?
So she found out that both Honora and Masuri went to Massima's camp and did some kind of, but they don't know what she did there. She didn't tell Berline that she was going. She didn't discuss it afterward. And so it's sort of like she's doing stuff behind my back, not letting me know about it. Like, even if you didn't discuss it with me beforehand, you should have come back and been like, "Yo, I did this." But if you're an Aes Sedai advisor to royalty, you kind of have an obligation to do what they say to a certain extent. That's kind of part of the bargain of it to a certain extent if you want to keep your job. So, she broke something. Berline, I feel like, has an emotional connection with Honora. You don't know how long they've been together, but I'm assuming since she got the crown. And I feel like Berline felt like there was a friendship there, that they had some kind of trust. And when you go behind my back and you go talk to the crazy dude and I don't know why, it's up to you to come to me and be like, "This is what I did. This is why. Let's have a conversation. Say you're sorry." Because Berline isn't here for that. So I think that that's just what it is. She is talking out loud because she's not going to, by herself, make the first move and tell Honora, "I'm pissed at you and this is why." But she will have a conversation with Perrin in Honora's hearing and make, I don't even think they're passive-aggressive comments. I think they're very pointed
just aggressive,
and just like, she fucked up and it's up to her to unfuck it. And until she does, I don't know what she wants. And that's her problem. And yeah, I feel like that's what it is.
I'm nodding to all of that. That's always been my read of this conversation as well.
Okay.
Because, Berline's very young and has had the crown for a good number of years at this point. So, Honora's been around for a while for some very formative times in Berline's, young adult life. And she, just did a major Aes Sedai switcheroo on her, and she's feeling deeply betrayed by that.
Yeah, it's a betrayal of a mentor and probably one of the few people she felt like she could trust and count on. And to have her do that, she's just sort of like, "You've got to necessarily come crawling back to me, but I need forthrightness. You need to lay out what you did, and until you do that, screw you."
Yeah, and in a world where my headcanon about the unrequited crush isn't true, this is the line that is why Galad gets saved and she burns herself out. It's up to her to mend what she has broken. Honora doesn't ever do anything to mend what she's broken until she delivers Galad to Berline and saves him by burning herself out. It
seems like a little much.
It is a lot, but I can't think of any other reason in the books why she does that. It's because she feels guilty over this betrayal, or not guilty, but because she knows this betrayal hurt Berline and she wants to make it right. And that's the decision she makes. This is why my headcanon is better, because it actually makes it all scale more properly. But I think in a world where you reject my headcanon, this is the line that whole thing is supposed to tie up.
Let's see. There's I don't have a lot for next little bit. There's no tea in town.
Pissing off the Aes Sedai.
Is somehow tea specifically anathema to the Dark One, right? Like the Aes Sedai drink it, there's none in this town. It's all gone bad. It's all gone sour. He picked on that first.
Just that it's a luxury, and of course your luxuries are going to go bad. Like if they ate chocolate, the chocolate would probably all have like melted in a nasty moldy pile. Like why can't you can't have anything fun?
Okay. Or they consumed it all first, right?
Yeah, it's like the one thing that gives them joy. The dead are walking around, everything's scary and awful, but at least we have tea.
Nope.
No, they probably drank all the wine really early on.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so the next thing I really have is just kind of all this Aes Sedai shenaniganry with Masuri and Seonid, like wanting to stay in the town and him saying, no, you can't do that. And like they go back and forth about it a whole bunch, and I don't really know why we get so much screen time with it, but I highlighted it a bunch, so.
I think partly because Perrin's making a note that he's pissing off Aes Sedai and he doesn't care, and also because both of them are there at the end when it happens, and it's made a point that they are stunned by it, and also because they misunderstand, which I'll point out when we get to the scene. But yeah, and it doesn't seem like Masuri is as invested in wanting to go back into the town, but Seonid, a Green who cares about these people and is, the battle Aja, and feels very invested in, like, we need to do something for these people, we need to figure this out. And it's anathema to her to abandon people in such a terrible state. And, she's not shrugged, this isn't my problem, I don't feel guilty, because for her and the way that she is structured, she's not a character we ever get very much building of, but what we do get sketched out shows a person who became a Green for very pointed reasons because she's queer. Her warders are like her brothers, and so she's a Green not because she's thirsty and wants all the D, but just because she firmly believes in fighting the shadow and in helping people in that fight, and so she was very driven to do that. And also she doesn't believe in Perrin being able to tell her no, which is why she tries to hide from him, but he sniffs her right out.
Doesn't believe in letting Perrin tell her no. True, though. It's very, very true.
Which is one of Perrin's great talents, is saying no to Aes Sedai, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
It's true, yeah. When nobody else will.
Yeah.
I think we can all see what happens to people who never get said no to. They just come up with terrible ideas. They're like, maybe with a little bit of editing might have been pretty good, right? Like this book, but someone got too big for their pants, too big for their britches. Someone didn't say no to them, and they decided to try out a new writing style. Just for an example that I'm pulling out of nowhere.
I did some writing where I wrote the other person's perspective from something I wrote, and I really enjoyed it, and it was decent writing and everything, but I went back and I read it, and I'm like, this is not as interesting or compelling as I wanted it to be, because it's just not. The story must go on.
We get another mention of the air over the town looking too dim, because this is the crossroads of Twilight, and we're really going to hammer that home for two chapters.
Right, it's very Twilighty.
Yeah. Perpetual twilight over this town that is a trading crossroads. And then we get this really hilarious wannabe spy that's absolutely not subtle at all, trying to bring Perrin some information about Balwer, it's a funny scene physically because
know how to do anything with a horse, and Perrin's like, he's gonna get kicked in the face.
We've seen Vannon and Matt do this scene very subtly and successfully, where they actually were hanging out with Pips and talking about escape plans from Ebu Dar. This is the same scene, but instead of Vannon, you've got this absolute noob that just has never done this once in his life.
The foppish noble trying to act like an Aiel.
Yeah.
And failing miserably. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah.
Whereas Vannon is a horse thief who could steal the horse out from under a nobleman, without the guy even noticing, right? Totally different things, but the same scene, the exact same physicality of the scene, just in a completely different tone. But yeah, he brings the information about Balwer wanting to stay the night and make a connection in the morning, like, because his friend is in fact out of town, because Tavir and twisting to make sure that Talanvor is able to make it in time.
Man, I really got to ask why they didn't just open a gateway up to somewhere else, right? Like, if you can open up a gateway to any town in the world, why would you get the Weevil-covered rain? Why wouldn't you go somewhere else?
Weevils are everywhere.
I guess. It just, to me, it feels like Perrin is very much short-sighted and that he thinks that longer distances are harder for gateways, so he tries to find someplace close by.
That's not an unfair point.
But to me, it's like, why don't you go really far away so no one's going to know that you have an army nearby collecting supplies?
Yeah, I feel like for him, the idea of going any further from Fail than absolutely necessary, even though he can get back just as easily, is just too psychologically stressful. Like, he couldn't do it, even though it really makes no difference when you have the one power to hand.
It's kind of like in the dream when he's got the Fail anchor tied to his leg, right? Like, you really can't go very far from her. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's silly, but understandable. It's not practical in the slightest, but the news about the town came to him and it's so close he could almost hike it. So it's okay.
I feel like, you remember that dream where he goes after Fail? She gets the little hedgehog, right? And she's in the dream. And he like rescues her like 2 or 3 times. And it feels like it's the same thing several times. And he's getting torn apart by talons. I really think that's like Jordan masterly foreshadowing how long it would take us to rescue Fail and how painful it would be for his audience.
I'm nodding.
Seriously, like...
Well, what I feel like people don't want to give credit for is that Jordan is actually doing us a tremendous favor with this, because it would be more of a favor if we didn't have to spend so much time with Perrin, but it's like... Fail without Perrin is so much better because we don't have to spend time either in his head with him taking responsibility for her emotions, or in her head dealing with him taking responsibility for her emotions. So having them separate so that she can just go and do her thing and be a leader and do a good job in the Shido camp. That's great. That was like made me start liking Fail, because the whole time I have to deal with her in the context of their relationship, I just can't.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Yeah.
So I'm probably one of the few people who actually don't hate the kidnapping scene. I would like it better if Perrin were like in a grief coma and tell about this scene. Right. I wish they would go into the tent and wake him up and be like, hey, yo, we captured some people. And that would be like the first perspective we got since she got captured.
Yeah.
But like, other than that, yeah, that's about where, I'm cool with the whole kidnapping and being separate, though, because I really am able to appreciate her when she's away from him.
It is her, like, sort of coming of age. Like, she goes from still fairly immature to, oh, this is what leadership is actually, instead of doing it in name only and according to her training, she's like, oh, I was actually a leader. I actually discovered leadership. I actually know why I'm doing this and how I'm able to help the people around me, not just to be a leader. And I feel like she had to come at, I like her story because she comes at leadership from the opposite direction of all our other characters, except maybe like Elaine, right? Is this idea that like most of our characters are nobodies who are coming up into it, whereas like Elaine and Fail have been groomed into it their whole lives. They just don't really want it, and they have to find the value in what they've been taught through these other adventures, and only then can they become effective leaders.
Yeah, and it's just far more riveting than anything you get with the two of them, because his tendency to take responsibility for her emotions is exhausting, and her having to deal with that is exhausting.
So we get mention of our shrieky man-child.
Yeah, last mention of him.
Yeah, Curian. Perrin thinks he's probably going to be going back into So Harbor to prove he's not afraid that night, but he's not even going to bother trying to talk him out of it. He'll be fine. He just has to do that for himself, and then he can exit stage left, not pursued by a bear, because there's nothing left for him to do in the entire plot. And we get a mention of Niald grinning for all he was worth as Perrin takes the main party back to the camp. Because he decides to leave, right? He's like, okay, it's going to take forever for all this grain to get winnowed. I need to go back to camp because he doesn't want to be away from Fail. So he takes some people back with him, and Niald is grinning, and I don't know why.
Dean is clean.
He's channeling and Sidine's clean.
Okay, it's just, he's still just excited about that, even because it's been like 10 days, right, at this point?
Something like that.
But it's still just that new and novel of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been laughing and smiling, and Perrin's thinking, God, if he's going crazy, I seriously don't need another fucking problem. And yeah, Neil just like, yeah, I'd be thrilled if I were in his shoes. I'd never stop smiling.
Fair enough.
It's the idea that maybe I won't go insane, right?
Or no more crazier than I am already.
Right. And future men who will channel won't have to deal with it at all. And every time I touch it, I can like just, okay, cool. So that's a moment of happiness before we arrive back at the camp. And when we arrive back at the camp, there is stillness from tension. It's not the stillness of quiet or of rest or of absence. It is of tension. Because there's an active torture scene going on. And everyone is uncomfortable. Which is cool.
The maidens brought in 5 Shido Lord Perrin. Arganda took them over to the Giladon in tents and put them to the question. Massima's with them.
And he's like, why did you let Arganda take them? And the wise ones are just sort of like, well, the Shido know how to embrace pain, so it's not like you're going to get something from them. Also, you told us you don't want us to fight, and Arganda doesn't trust us, so they would have fought with us if we had tried to take them, so, like, what do you want? And so they figure, okay, since even Shido know how to embrace pain, Geldana would have fought us, and they're stone dogs, so you honestly don't have a great chance of really actually getting any information out of them, you know.
The worst Aiel to have captured is stone dogs.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, parents sort of being like, oh yeah, I guess you do have to cause pain if you're going to torture people. And it's like, yeah, Perrin, that's sort of the point. That's what they're doing.
He's like, he hadn't let that thought form in his head before this, so it's like he knew it, and it was like, but he just turned away from it because causing people pain is literally the thing that Perrin hates more than anything else. And that is something that Jordan has shown us since the first time we were in his head. You know, always makes it a point to be extra careful because he's bigger and stronger than anyone else, and he doesn't want to cause anybody pain. He thinks his words through carefully because he doesn't want to say something too hastily and accidentally hurt someone's feelings. He never wants to hurt anybody. And so once you get here, he's just sort of like, yeah, okay, that's actually what's involved with this, and I've come to this point. And I've said I'd do anything to get Fail back, so will I do this?
And then the answer is yes.
Well, yes and no, I feel like, because, I mean, yes, but you go, and then I'll make my point.
He walks in, and they've got, all 5 of them are in there. 4 of them are like hogtied in the corner. And for once, there's a naked man. For once, the naked person singled out in the room full of clothed people is a man. We're going to give Robert Jordan credit for doing this.
Sometimes he put Perrin in sometimes he put Rand in the bath with a bunch of maidens.
Yes, but this is a position of like extreme discomfort and torture and lots of people being real shitty, and it's a man who's the subject of being naked and made uncomfortable, and it's disturbingly refreshing, and I hate it. I don't see why you need to make people naked in this situation. I mean, I get it. It's psychologically fucking weird and destabilizing, but I just don't like it. But also, I don't like the idea of a pile of coals on someone's stomach. So I'm clearly not well cut out for torture.
I mean, he did approach the smell of meat roasting, which is always a fun one. Whenever I see someone approaching with the smell of meat roasting, I always go, uh-oh, somebody's getting tortured with fire. And of course, who's doing it? Harry, which, if you remember, was the ear harvester that Perrin captured and then released. Right, and to send back to Massima as one of his corrupted, I don't know what you want to call Massima's followers, We have People the Dragon, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the bad ones, you know? He's not one of the general rabble. He's one of the, like, actually, like, serial killer kind of freaky people. And yeah, Perrin had let him go because he couldn't be sure that the ears were his, and, like, they totally were, and he knows that now. And, of course, that's the guy taking point on actually doing the torture while everyone else watches.
Oh, and Dragonsworn, not People the Dragon. Thank you, Zool. Yeah.
Dragonsworn.
Yes, it's Dragonsworn is what everyone gets called by people who don't like them. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get real specific about it, like the people who follow Masema specifically are very much sworn to the dragon in a unique way.
Right. Except they're kind of sworn to the false dragon that is in Masema's head, who's actually a Forsaken. So I kind of almost want to call them like dark friends.
But a lot of them are dupes rather than deliberately. But then also they
dupe
say
friends.
Dupe
I like
friends.
dupe
Dragon
friends.
dicks.
Yeah.
Just cult members.
Yeah. No kidding.
Before he actually gets there, I appreciate, like, he gets the smell of meat roasting, and then it's like, and then there's a muffled sound that he tried not to hear. So it's like he doesn't want to hear the screaming. He doesn't want to hear the sounds of torture. Like, once again, he's building up to the fact that Perrin doesn't want to have to deal with the pain being caused or the fallout of that pain, which is why I just find this whole chapter so gut-wrenching and riveting. And literally, this was the most shocking thing I ever read in the Wheel of Time for books and books and books. It was...
Really? What made it so shocking to you? Why?
Because I never expected it. I never expected he would do it. It was just stunned me. So...
Yeah.
And the build-up to it is gut-wrenching and twisting, because the way that he words it and the way you're in Perrin's head, you know he's super twisted up. He's sprinkled throughout. A little bit earlier when he's outside of Sohabor, he's thinking about how, what if Gaul and the maidens brought word of Fail, an actual sighting perhaps. He would give anything to talk to someone who had seen her and could tell him if she was unharmed. And, so he's having, he'll give anything. He'd do anything. And then you get to see, what anything actually is. Even as you're being told he wasn't trying to think about that you'd have to cause pain, and he doesn't want to hear that somebody's, crying out in pain. And so he does something that does cause pain, but almost immediately ceases to be painful, because he's immediately like, heal him.
He's realizing physical pain is not what's going to work with the Aiel. You have to use emotional pain.
You have to use shame.
Shame's
the only language that they all speak.
Mm-hmm. He understands their culture, and he uses his knowledge of their culture to lay out a very bleak future for them. And what let's go ahead and I always jump ahead. Go ahead, Aradia, and continue to lay out the story.
Yeah, he kicks the coals off, right? Because causing pain for pain's sake doesn't work for him. Right, like he's not into that, so he decides to try like a...
And it doesn't get you good information anyway.
No, it doesn't. So he tries to go a little bit good cop. He tries to be reasonable. He gets out the axe and uses it to close the man's mouth very carefully, like showing he can be delicate and non-harmful with the axe.
Before we get there, there's a line I need to talk about.
Oh, okay.
It's from Masema. And he says, I know them. They pretend to feel pain, but they do not. Not the way other men do. You must be willing and able to hurt a stone to make one of them talk. And just how much that relates to our current medical system and the way
we're treated.
The women and people of color are treated as if they don't feel pain the same way white people do. They have thicker skin. They have less pain. That this idea that racism, because people don't react culturally the same way you do to pain, they must not feel pain. I mean, even down to circumcisions and the way babies aren't necessarily anesthetized before that happens because they don't quote unquote feel pain. It's all bullshit. We all feel pain, right? Like we all have the nerves, we all have the brain, we all have the spine, right? Like pain's the same from you to you. The Aiel are trained to deal with it in a way that makes them hard to question. That doesn't mean they don't feel the pain. That doesn't mean Egwene doesn't feel the pain when she's spanked, right? Like she just accepts it.
Yeah. I was thinking about that when I was reading the song. Like they don't feel pain like we do. Is like that is a line that many a racist has used while performing really unethical medical experiments and other war crimes. Like, it makes sense coming from Missima. He is War Crimes McGee. But, like, it's, that is really worth pointing out that one of the major racisms within this world is getting that line applied to that dynamic. That is very worth pointing out.
Yeah. And they're all just so gross and so eager, and it's not even about getting the information. It's just sort of like, we've got these people and we want to torture them, and it's all so gross, and you could tell Perrin's so disgusted by all of them. And so when he's thinking about, what has to be done and how you have to be willing and able to hurt a stone, and you don't get the internal thoughts where he's just sort of like, what will actually harm an Aiel? What will actually motivate an Aiel? What do they actually fear? Because they don't, they might feel pain, but they can take pain. They can accept pain. It will take forever to make a Shido talk. I don't have time. And they're stone dogs who, I don't know if everybody understands what makes a stone dog, but, they are specifically designed to be rear guards. And if you're losing a battle, they all stay behind to die while everybody else gets away. So the philosophical leanings of a person who decides to become a stone dog is already someone who has I would think a dark philosophical bent, or somebody who's already ready to wake from the dream, or just
maybe fatalistic, but that's not the right term.
Yeah. It's the type of person where it's just sort of like, oh, you're going to torture me. Well, it's just the type of person that isn't going to be easy to harm in the same way another person might be, not because they're ideal, but just because they're a little bit fucked up. I think you got to be a little bit fucked up to be a stone dog.
Hey, Gaul is a stone dog.
Yeah, point.
Yeah,
he's a little bit fucked up.
Yeah, he's what Perrin's doing is culturally responsive torture.
Yes.
And really, that's what he's doing. It's culturally responsive war crimes.
He doesn't actually want to hurt somebody. So yes, cutting off someone's hand is painful and terrible. You're maiming someone. But he's immediately like, heal him. And Masuri is just like, are you crazy? We can't give him his hand back, because she thinks that he's immediately like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. I did something impulsive. It was terrible. Heal him. And that's not what he's thinking at all. He's like, heal him. I don't want him to actually be in pain. I certainly don't want him to die. Heal him. And then we can have a conversation where I can lay out, here's what's going to happen from this point on. Sorry about your hand, but I need you to know I'm serious. And it's searing. It's terrible. Maiming someone is like enough to make me, the first time I read this, be absolutely just viscerally stunned. It was like being punched in the stomach. I was like, whoa, Perrin, but.
Because he was trying to bargain. He was trying to be reasonable. But the guy's not going to talk to him. And then, did you notice the axe was light as a feather?
In his duty
hands?
Is lighter than a feather. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's his duty.
It's his duty. That's how he's framing this. And it's the only thing he can think to do. He's like, I need to escalate the stakes so that way my very reasonable, because he's not, like he said, he lays it out. I'm not asking you to betray your people. Like, he's working within what he knows of stone dogs, right? Because he knows Gaul. And he's like, they're very honorable and they defend their people. Well, what if I try to appeal to the fact that I'm not asking them to hurt their people? That's not good enough. Okay. Like, let me cut your hand off. Now let's return. Like, there's this level of calmness that goes through it that is so jarring with, how you feel as a reader seeing Perrin do this. But
because he's completely disassociated.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah.
And it's got to be so disturbing for the Aiel watching this happen, all 5 of them, right? Being like, the level to which this man is not emotionally responding to what he's doing is like Aiel levels of cold, It's,
Perrin is the careful thought is the way, and, you don't get the internal narrative showing him reasoning it out and taking it step by step, because RJ wants us to have the emotional impact, but this is a very rationally thought out and actually really intelligent way, because, torture generally doesn't work. You hurt people and they tell you whatever to make you stop. This was exactly what would work, because Aiel don't want to feel shamed. They don't want to feel useless. They want to be able to, I can't imagine what would be worse for an Aiel than disability, but at least if you have a disability in the waste, there are still things that you can do to have jif when you're among your people. But if you're left out in the wetlands, not even being able to take care of yourself, I mean, how horrifying. I couldn't think of anything more horrifying for Aiel.
And then he uses game theory to tie it all up, too.
So, okay, I got to read 2 quotes and just how they compare in my head, and they've always lived side by side in my head. 2 hands and 2 feet, he said coldly. Light, he sounded like ice. He felt like ice to his bones. That means you get 4 chances to answer the same, and if you all hold out, I still won't kill you. I'll find a village to leave you in, some place that will let you beg, somewhere the boys will toss a coin to the fierce Aielman with no hands or feet. You think on it and decide whether it's worth keeping my wife from me. Followed immediately by, to the pain means this. If we duel and you win, death for me. If we duel and I win, life for you. But life on my terms. The first thing you lose will be your feet below the ankle. You will have stumps available to use within 6 months. Then your hands at the wrist. They heal somewhat quicker. 5 months is a fair average. Next, your nose. No smell of dawn for you, followed by your tongue. Deeply cut away. Not even a stump left. And then your left eye. And then my right eye, and then my ears. Shall we get on with it, the prince said. Wrong, Wesley's voice rang across the room. Your ears you keep so that every shriek of every child shall be yours to cherish. Every babe that weeps in fear at your approach, every woman that cries, dear God, what is that thing, will reverberate forever with your perfect ears. Which is from The Princess Bride, obviously. But it's so incredible how close the motivation and the fear and the terror is in both of those quotes. Perrin just, starts it with cutting the hand off and says, I'll do the rest if you don't stop me.
And then you get even Massima was staring at him as if he had never before seen the man standing there with the axe, which I think is the last thing that is just like the period at the end of it, or the exclamation point, I don't know, or the underline, because of all people, having Massima shut up and look at you and finally see you. What else? You don't need anything else to show the true impact of like what happened, and then for him to turn and walk away and people to part like Moses parts the sea.
Yeah, because like Massima has been hyping him up as a scary evil person, but he didn't think he was like that scary and evil, right? Like, yeah, it's very impactful. Very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
But is it evil?
I wonder how much of this is also Aram's undoing, right? Because it's not that long before we, okay, so first of all, when Perrin first came into the room, here's a quote. It had to be done, Aram said, half pleading, half demanding. He was on Massima's other side, which is really close to saying he's on Massima's side, right? So at this point, he's almost there. At least visually, that's where he's standing, is on Massima's side. And so, I think there may be this pushback as, he sees Perrin essentially do this crazy thing, which is cut off a man's hand and then threaten his sanity. And I think that might push him over the edge to thinking that, no, this is why Perrin's a dark friend, because of this moment. I mean, the eyes too, but
yeah, we've been making the argument that Aram has been lost for a while. It's somewhere in here. But yeah, I don't think that there's much you can do to ever convince Aram that Perrin isn't a problem at this point. Probably even if Massima was taken out of the picture, Aram would never trust Perrin again. Because he's not in a good place to be witnessing this.
No.
But also, he was like, please let me put burning coals on this person. Because, and so it's like, I don't know that there was anything left to salvage with Aram at this point. But certainly this is driving him into negative points, if nothing else.
Aram has always kind of been the problem, because it's almost like he's always wanted to do bad things and be excited about it. Like, oh, the guards are at the gates in Camelin. We don't even need any of the archers. We can just kill them all. And Perrin's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Just gotta go talk to the guards. Or excited to kill people at Demise Wells. He just wants to kill and cause ruin and destruction. And it's almost like he's disappointed that Perrin was able to find such a quick and clean and honestly relatively painless. I mean, maiming someone is not painless in the sense of psychological harm that it causes, but if you can heal them to the point where they have literally no pain, he's not going to have phantom limb pain because the one power is able to heal you in all that way. It's almost like he's disappointed because he didn't really hurt the Aielman all that much. He didn't really cause all that much damage, and so he took the fun out of it.
There isn't supposed to be fun in it, Aram.
No, there's not. The whole point is just to find as fast as possible, have you seen my wife? Because we need these next steps. So it's like the cold logic of his choice because he wants to cause the least amount of pain possible.
Right. And in a lot of ways, what he did does cause the least amount of pain possible. No one else gets burned. No one else gets tortured. One person loses one hand. It's not very painful for very long.
Probably not his dominant hand.
And those 5 people get to keep their lives. They don't get tortured. And he finds out that they know nothing. Which also cripples him because it turns out they knew nothing, right? This whole thing was they don't know where Fael is. The camp's huge. Why would they know where one random guy Shine is?
Yeah, that's maybe the worst part, is that this is all for nothing.
It's not for nothing, though, because they learn, we should find Guy Shine and ask them.
True.
So it helps them narrow down the field of the search that they should make. It was actually quite useful. It wasn't for nothing at all. Was it worth Perrin doing whatever he did to his soul? That's only Perrin can answer that question.
Fair enough.
Why do they learn that they need Guy Shine here, right? Because it seems to me that they could have figured that out ahead of time.
It did not occur to them.
Yeah, which is like, again, I don't know that you needed to cut off a man's hand to think that through. You could have just thought it through better, but... I
guess if cutting off a man's hand gets you there in the end, all's well that ends well. Also is, I find it funny that like a bloody hand and an axe were something we saw in Min's vision of Rand, and yet here it is super important for Perrin. And I think we talked about that at the time. Like, we always assume that vision's about Rand losing his hand to Semirog, but is it somehow that this event is important to Rand because it's important to Perrin? Doesn't seem like it, because where else do we see a bloody axe actually cutting off a hand?
Yeah, maybe there's some existential reason why Perrin needs to drop the axe before he can help Rand. Some esoteric kind of thing where he has to be the hammer, not the axe, in order to protect Rand properly. But that's real stretchy.
I always just assumed it was one of those visions that never actually got completed because I thought there was like a bloody hand and a white hot iron. I thought originally it was supposed to be something like Elaine was supposed to chop off Rand's hand, and that just ended up not happening. Yeah.
I think it was Morghese, actually, is what it was. Is it basically when he fell into the garden, he was supposed to get his hand cut off for being trespasser.
I feel like you should cut off someone's feet.
Seems excessive.
A thief should get their hands cut off. Trespassing should be your feet.
Maybe they thought he was trying to steal the daughter heir. Maybe he was trying to steal her heart.
Well,
which he succeeded in taking from the palace.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, Perrin does the thing, walks off into the woods, walks for a long time, and then finally, at long last, in a move that's been promised since Eye of the World, he throws the axe away.
Mm-hmm. Since Perrin, what I think it's really been obvious since Perrin says, when are you going to choose the hammer over the axe, right? Or choose between the hammer and the axe?
When are you going to give it up for the hammer?
That's right. That's right.
It's in a dark prophecy. Yeah. Presumably also a light prophecy, but definitely a dark prophecy.
And the Shan Chan saying, is that later when he says, if you said you were the Wolf King, I think the last battle is upon us.
Tylee Kerrigan says that to him in the next book.
But yeah, he throws the axe away and it lands in a tree. And I feel like there's got to be a myth,
I was wondering about that. Is there some manner of historical reference that he's making that, like, in our stories?
I don't know, but I feel like it is. That's what
I was wondering.
And I don't even know how you would look that up in Origins, aside from just reading it cover to cover, which obviously me, a voracious reader, is never going to do, because it's a skinny book. And why would I read a skinny book? I guess. I gotta say, I did actually start reading it, and I read the opening part, and I may have been crying by the end.
Not to laugh at your crying, but
books don't make me cry, and I was maybe a little bit ugly crying. It was obnoxious. But yeah, it feels like the kind of mythic thing that Thor would do, hurling an axe and splitting the mountains. I feel like Thor throwing axes and splitting mountains feels like folklore. It feels like a story.
Or is it supposed to be something like, the axe in the tree, after 3,000 years becomes the sword in the stone, or whoever pulls it out, becomes the king, or I don't know.
Or it's just, I don't know, but it feels super mythic.
Yeah, it does.
The way he just leaves it there.
I mean, so here's a story that I can see has some parallels. In one story, the god Hephaestus slices Zeus's head with a axe to free the goddess Athena. So if you've got a splitting with the axe.
Hephaestus, isn't he the blacksmith?
Yeah. Greek god of artisans, blacksmiths, metalworking, and volcanoes.
Huh.
And he had an axe, and he used it to split Zeus's head open.
So the tree is Zeus.
And then he rescued somehow. Yeah. Or the knowledge, right? That somehow he's splitting open Zeus and the knowledge is springing forth with Athena.
It also is releasing a woman from bondage.
Mm-hmm. No, it's got a lot of surprisingly accurate parallels, actually, now that I'm looking at it, right? That story and this story feel very, very similar in terms of structure and certain beats. Obviously, this, not the exact same story, but yeah, I bet he's referencing. As much as he pulled from all the different stories to create one story with aspects of them, I can't believe he didn't know about this. Well,
somebody ask Michael Livingston about that. Because if there's references to it, he presumably has read those references.
Good question. They come to find Perrin, and it says that they all talked, they all gave the same answers, and the answers weren't helpful. It says that Sulin said the maidens made sure to take them when they had no weapons so they could be questioned. So I know if you touch someone armed, then they can ask to become Guy Shine, and presumably Guy Shine cannot be put to the question. So if you take someone when they don't have weapons and they can be put to the question, then you can't make them Guy Shine? How does that work? What do you do with them then?
I don't know. That's weird. Because he says that they can just be put with the prisoners, but he's thinking in terms of Wetlander nonsense, not J-Ito and Guy Shine.
Perrin's we'll have to kill them, and Perrin's fuck you. Yeah, I don't know I don't think we ever got what that was with Aiel.
I mean, it feels like just straight up kidnapping people, right? Kidnapping them for questioning. They didn't defend themselves. They didn't have a chance to defend themselves. It almost feels like a violation of honor to take them in the first place, but it's at least we're not violating the Guy Shine code of honor, right? We're just violating the warrior code of honor?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how that works, because it seems like there's only very specific strictures under where, because of the way J-Ito works, you'd be allowed to question someone versus when you could make them Guy Shane.
Yeah. Maybe
Guy Shane have protections. Maybe
yeah, you can't question Guy Shane.
Super protected, and it does seem very not J-Ito to be aha, I captured you and you didn't have a weapon, therefore I can do what I want to you and it's not dishonorable. That seems off. That's weird. But also, the Shido are starting to collectively lose a lot of G in the eyes of the other Aiel, so maybe they're well, it's just Shido, so it's fine. I don't know.
It's Shido, who cares?
I don't know. It feels weird to me. I do like, though, what how Elias and Perrin talk about all this stuff, before the others show up, where Perrin's I think I've got a problem, and Elias is dude, that is adrenaline. You don't have a problem. That's just adrenaline. That's literally how the mammalian brain works. It's okay. Because Perrin thinks that feeling alive is bad when violence triggers it.
It's you're normal. You don't get off on it. You looked real fucked up about what you did back there, and then you went and threw your axe away. I think you're fine, or as fine as you can be. So
Yeah, like you're hurting, but you're not broken. Like you're scared, and that's the correct reaction to be having. So like, yeah, it's funny that Perrin's like afraid of it because he's afraid of being the wolf, right? He's afraid of that like ability to lose himself in the moment and be fully engaged with violence. He's terrified of that, and once he gets over his fear of the wolf, he's not so bothered by battle rage taking him over.
for real.
Yeah, and then Perrin doesn't believe Elias, and Elias is like, that's because you're fucking young. Like,
Right,
it's very
yeah.
Hopper, like, foolish cub.
In more words, very, foolish cub.
At some point, you'll grow up and you'll know that I'm right.
But it's interesting that Elias tells him to throw it away if he ever comes to like it. And that's not what's going on here, right? Like, Perrin never got to the point where he liked it. It always made him sick.
Right. Yeah, he somehow learns to enjoy his violent side in a way that doesn't bother him with the hammer. But yeah, he never actually liked using the axe. It's just that the axe always bothered him. It's a strange shading of what Elias's advice was.
It's not just that you only get to throw it away if you come to like it. He decides, okay, I was willing to do something with it, and you never get the feeling that he regrets what he did. Don't get the feeling that he thought he was necessarily wrong for doing what he did. But I think he felt like, okay, this was a step further than I ever want to go again, and so I'm going to throw it away so that never happens again.
Right, because I feel like Elias's advice is all about like not loving it in battle, right? And Perrin doesn't throw it away because he goes absolutely batshit insane in battle and kills a bunch of people with it. He does that all the time. He's got no problem with it, right? His whole, berserker rage is something he uses in battle, and that's fine, right? But the second he uses it in cold-bloodedness, the second he uses logic and precision and lets his...
When he uses it to make a point.
Yeah. So it's such a weird moment to throw the axe away because it's not what I was expecting when I was first reading these books. In a lot of ways, that's why I like this scene. I think the first few times I read it, like, I missed that he threw his axe away, I think. Like, I didn't realize that was how significant of a moment it was because I wasn't expecting him to do that in a moment of calm, collected decision making. I was expecting him to go nuts, and kill somebody in battle after there was no need for it, and then realize that he'd gone too far in battle and throw it away at that moment, right? Like, so this to me was, I had a hard time wrapping my mind around it the first few times as to, wait, this isn't what I was really expecting, but I think it's better this way.
So much more impactful because it's like, not being caught up in the moment, it's making a choice. It's thinking something through and making a choice and then having to live with it, but being like, I never want to go there again. Mm-hmm. I'm done with this.
That was a bridge too far.
I don't know that he thinks it was a bridge too far. It's just a bridge I don't ever want to cross again because he decided it was worth it for Fael. He would be willing to do it for Fael, and I get the impression he would be willing to do it again. I don't know. He feels like it was for nothing, but I don't know that it necessarily was for nothing because they determined, okay, what we need to do is find Guy Shine instead. It never comes across that he wishes he hadn't done it, just that he doesn't like who he became
when he did it,
in order to do it, and he never wants to be that person again.
Yeah, he's like, I feel alive in battle, and I never want the torture to be the thing that makes me feel alive. He's fine with battle making him feel alive. He's fine with holding Fael making him feel alive. But torture and maiming somebody, if that eventually becomes something that he enjoys, I think that's what he fears more than necessarily the losing of control.
It's just so weird because you can be just as impulsive with a blunt instrument.
Right. The hammer doesn't stop him from killing anybody. It doesn't stop him from destroying hands. It doesn't stop him from...
Like, that's why I don't... Like, I agree, Seth. Like, it's hard to get why this is significant for him, even though it obviously is.
He doesn't lay it out. He doesn't explain to you in as many words exactly. I know there's this paragraph here where he's like, I don't think I could stand it if I came to feel that way about what I just did back there, right? I don't think Fael would have me if I came to that, right? So there's this feel that like there's something that is a line that he has drawn. But to us, it feels like a pretty arbitrary line, I think, right? It doesn't feel like it's this big old, like... But I think in real military terms, it is distinctive between willing to go crazy and berserk in battle when your life is just as at risk as the other person versus doing that to someone who's a prisoner.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. And the axe was light in his hands, and he doesn't want it to be easy to do that. And yeah.
Also, because for him, the hammer is only ever secondary as a tool of violence. It's always first for making things, for art, for building and creating, and only secondarily for destruction. He would never have it be a go-to. It would never feel light if he were to use it in the way that he used the axe. And so I don't think it would be something where he could just effortlessly do that. I don't think he would do that. I feel like it would ruin the hammer for him if he were to ever do that with it.
Whereas the axe kind of was already like that. It didn't have that association existed from the jump with the axe.
Well, and the difference, again, between the axe and the spear is the axe cannot be used for anything except destruction, right? Whereas the hammer can.
I mean, you can use it for chopping wood. You can use, but that's destruction. Yeah. Like an Aiel can pick up an axe and use that as a weapon, I feel like. They just don't.
Yeah, it's still a tool.
It's different than the Aiel way, right? They say anything that's a tool isn't just a weapon, right? That's how they justify the spear. However, I do think that's a justification rather than reason, right? Because they use the spear. We all saw when they started using it in the flashback, right? Like, it's yeah. So whereas Perrin is different from, it can't. He's saying the axe can only be used to destroy, even if that destruction is creative, right? Even if it's productive, right? You're cutting down a tree to build a house. It's still being used to destroy, whereas the hammer can actually create. I feel like that's a very subtle distinction, and again, more semantics in Perrin's head because he's a blacksmith than anything else. If he was a lumberjack, that would probably be like a very different, look at things. Maybe the hammer would be the thing that he destroys with because he can only crush things with it, and the axe can be used to create housing and carve and, create sculpture, right?
The axe was made specifically to be a weapon. It wasn't made as a wood axe. It's specifically a war axe, whereas the hammer is specifically a blacksmith's hammer, and any use of it as a weapon is incidental.
That is very true.
It's not a war hammer. It's not like Mahalanar, which is specifically a war hammer.
So is he saying something about how the intent with which something was made is more important than its actual function? And then how does that apply to Ta'veren and, threads in the pattern? And I feel like we could go really deep into philosophy on that, but...
Well, Perrin literally in this chapter is like, well, sometimes threads in the pattern are just people and they don't want to be tugged around. And the Aes Sedai are like, you think that matters? Like, it doesn't matter, dude. Like, you're missing the entire point of the analogy if you think that people's free will matters to the fact that they're threads in the pattern. So, like,
No, it's like you sound like a child.
Yeah, so I think that, this is the level of depth that Perrin is trying to go to, of being like, how can I, like, step outside my role as Ta'veren as a thread in the pattern, and as the guy who has the war axe, he's gonna build himself an alternative reality, I guess, with his hammer.
I'm guessing that Jordan wrote this scene partly because he would have chopped somebody's hands off to carry it back, and so he felt the visceralness of the scene is such that I felt like he was really in Perrin's headspace and thinking about what it would be like and how frantic he would be and what he would do to get his wife back.
Yeah. I also feel like the impact of the moment is slightly lost, at least at a casual read, because it makes such a subtle difference in getting Fael back. This isn't the day that he gets her back. This isn't the opening blow of the battle that gets her back. Like, it's so inconsequential that it's like, well, I think you're still ready to cut off a man's hand to get her back. Aren't you going to want your hand chopping tool? Because with the hammer, you're left with pulverizing, and that's nasty.
I think it forces him, because there's a dramatic character change in him going into book 11. He's much more contained with his emotions. He's much more willing to start making alliances. He goes to make the alliance with the Shanshan and make practical decisions, and not, his critical thinking skills are really frayed, and the choices that he makes are very frayed, and he struggles with his allies and with working with anybody. Like, he's just really struggling, and he reminds me of a chicken with its head cut off for like 2 books as he's freaking out about Fail. And it's like he finally gets his shit together after this moment, and he's just tonally quite different after. So it's very much a before and after, regardless of whether or not he's gotten Fail, because it's like he needed to get his shit together before he could work to get her. And so I don't know. I find every time I read, like, I was reading this like with my heart all like, and I've read it a ton because it's just like, it's never not impactful, because he's the gentle one, he's the sweet one, and so to push him to push himself to get what he feels like he has to get because of how desperate he is to get his wife back is just, and yeah, because I would be desperate to get my wife back, so I could feel that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like you said at the top of the episode, this would have hit a lot better if he had been in a unseen grief coma between the kidnapping and now. If this was the first time we'd seen him since the kidnapping, and his beard was down to his belly and all messy, this would have hit in a way different way.
I don't know that would have necessarily been better narratively. It just would have been less exhausting and irritating to have to read all the stuff in between.
Yeah, which I would argue is better by definition. But your mileage may vary.
I still want to recut these 3 books down to 1. I think it would be a great book.
Yeah.
Maybe in the time between when we finish this book and when we start the next one. I might work on that.
But for now, little time jump, 3 days forward, and all the carts have returned with resources, and Balwer is returning with Talonvor, who has the offer of 15,000 Shanshan, mostly Terrabonners technically, but Shanshan, who are already pissed at the Shido and want to beat them up. And that sets the stage for a very, very epic battle. And I don't know how much you guys want to talk about that versus just having it get read. But that's basically all that I have left in the chapter is, Talonvor and Shanshan, oh boy.
I guess my only question is, any ideas about who Balwer's man in So Harper was? Was it Talonvor, or was it some other contact that just worked out so that he had to wait for Talonvor to come back and Taviran to mount? Yeah,
it's that.
I think it was a rando.
So we never find anything out about this guy in So Harbor.
No, it was just Balwer was being an agent of Taviran. Hey man, Balwer's cool. He's the glue that holds a bunch of stuff together.
Talk about another person where you're like morally relativistic, and they're always kind of like, I always give Balwer side eye. Like, I like him, but
yeah.
Just sort of like, I don't know that I think you're a good dude.
And what do you think about Perrin's, so he throws the axe and he walks away, and the last thing he says is, maybe some fool gleeman will make a story out of it. And I gotta wonder if that's not Robert Jordan, sort of nodding and winking to himself.
Oh yeah, that's a fourth wall wink for sure.
Because he's just being like, oh yeah, I'm that gleeman.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am the fool gleeman. I did make a story out of an axe I found stuck into a tree. That totally happened.
Maybe he did, yeah.
And then he walks away from this moral decision to walk away from the axe and walks right into saying, yes, I will use chained, enslaved magic users to get my wife back, which is, I would argue, an escalation from threatening maiming.
I don't think you're wrong. You go straight into the enemy of my enemy is my friend territory and deals with the devil.
Which it pays off so many different rippling dividends, but it's also it almost shocked me as much as him doing the hand chopping of just damn, Perrin, you really are willing to do anything. This is a hell of a thing for you to be agreeing to without even batting an eye. But I guess you just chopped a man's hand off, so this kind of feels all par for the course for you now, buddy.
All bets are off.
There is a certain amount of, gosh, how do I think about this? I think about the alliance between the Shan-Chan and the Westlanders, of which Perrin is the first to recognize it is a necessity, right? As very much a alliance between Russia and the United States in World War II. Right? Like, the Nazis are coming.
Oh, yeah.
We all know the Nazis are bad guys. We have to take them out, and we're going to ally with people who are not necessarily treating their natives very well. We don't want them to take any territory over, because when they do, they enslave some of the people that are in there in a way that we are not okay with. But yet, we need to make this alliance in order to defeat the Nazis, right? Like...
Yeah, because it is literally fascism coming for everything.
Right, yeah, exactly, for everything. Yeah. And so I do think there is this really interesting way we can say, hey, you know, there's a history of countries making these kind of alliances, even, and maybe even especially when you don't agree with the way they treat their internal people. Because in a lot of ways, how do you enact change in those kind of countries? You don't necessarily want to go to war with them, right? What you want to do is infiltrate them culturally and convince them that what they're doing is morally wrong in order to change their own behavior.
Yeah, I was 100% thinking about that because it's just sort of like, yeah, does it feel gross to work with the Shan-Chan? 100%. But I was thinking about Russia and the United States and like the race for Berlin and how you knew that you were going to have to give up half of it to the Russians and how gross it is to think about all of the people who had to, you know, live in Eastern Germany and grow up under that, you know, as opposed to the people who got to grow up in Western Europe and live a much better life, and how nasty it must have felt to have to leave so much of it in Russian hands. But what were you supposed to do?
Hedwig and the Angry Inch is my favorite documentary about East and West Berlin. That's somewhat of a joke, but yeah, I mean, the whole point of that movie, right, is that in order to escape East Berlin, the main character removes their genitalia to pass as a woman, even though they're not necessarily transgender so much as they are cross-dressing, right? And so they end up without a dick, right? The Angry Inch, right? If you've seen the movie, and it's all about, the suffering that they had to go through because that part of Germany was taken over by Russia, a more repressive regime.
Right, the USSR specifically.
The USSR at that point, yeah. That Russia,
yeah. Yeah, no, it's when empires clash, there will be shrapnel, and you can't have a standard for purity when you're talking about superpowers colliding at a planetary scale. It's just not a reasonable condition to bring to the negotiating table.
For Perrin, the end of the world is Fail, but that's how he makes that connection first, right? Is we have to work with the devil to fight the other devil.
Oh, I get people because I've, read and seen numerous people who are really grossed out and uncomfortable with the whole working with the Shan-Chan, but I find their dislike of it, it's like, I get that you dislike it, but the fact that you are so vehement in your dislike, I find that very unrealistic. And like you're looking at it from a privileged position, in your castle, not actually sitting on the ground and thinking about how would this really work? Because realistically, that's kind of how it would really work. Is it pretty? Is it nice? Do you like it? No. Does it make you feel good inside? No. Is it real? 100%.
Especially when we look at just the modern United States and how there are things in our economy and the oligarchy that we are existing under that nobody likes, nobody's happy about. It doesn't make us but we're not rising up because things are good enough, and the Shan-Chan do that. Well, not yet.
We're working on it.
Well, we're working on it, but we're not there yet,
They're getting worse and worse. Eventually it'll get...
We are sort of bubbling towards rising up at this moment.
And the Shan-Chan have this great, almost Roman Empire-esque ability to take over, but not really change things enough to really upset the people who would rise up. And, they kidnap a few women, but, what's a little bit of slavery of a small class when the rest of us get to keep living our lives? Well, honestly, highly policed, safer roads. All you got to do is take that small group of people and demonize them, which, Chandler's not that hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pants says, plus they're witches. yeah, it's
which is ridiculous because witches all be over here.
Yeah, and until it happens to someone that you love, and then and then how do you find people to be on your side? And when it's a giant oppressive system that runs so well because they have such a smoothly oiled bureaucracy, it's so hard because it's gross. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, but I see it and I'm like, that's so real. It's so realistic.
Right, and we start out with the very real enemy of the marauding Shido, who are moving like actual locusts across the landscape. This is not an unprovoked war by Perrin and the Shan-Chan. This is very much a provoked conflict. And then they move on to be able to deal with literal armies of darkness and shadow and evil, which we can all agree are not good for humanity. So it's like they start out in a almost morally questionable conflict as a practice round for the very, very, very not morally questionable conflict against the actual evil Dark One.
Well, and I didn't think about how rare resources are and how, part of the Shido taking Fail is basically them taking the resources of the local people. And so in a lot of ways, Perrin riding out to stop them is very much a hero of the locals in that he is preventing the locusts, right? He's stopping the infection. He's stopping the plague. He's doing it for personal reasons, but everybody around there is going to be happy that the Shido were wiped out, including the Shan-Chan. So, in a lot of ways, it might be questionably a little questionable if you look at his personal morals, but really from a protecting the people that he is in charge of, what other choice does he have?
Take no prisoners and leave nothing that isn't nailed down alone. Like, someone has to confront them and crush them and send them back with their tail between their legs. So yeah, from a larger geopolitical standpoint, nobody is looking at Perrin and going, what a selfish douche. They're being like, wow, that guy is really sticking up for the little guy.
Yeah, I think it's very sensical for Perrin to make a deal with the Shan-Chan, and not even just from the perspective of they have his wife. It's almost, it's gross to think of all of the channelers being chained, but it's sort of also like the Shido channelers are going to go around and wreck and do terrible damage. Would it be better if they were just killed? Probably, but, it's gross. I feel like it's kinder to kill people than enslave them, but either way, it's not nice. But the Shido are they're terrible. The Shido are basically as bad as Masima's people. They're awful. Yeah,
there's no reasoning with them. There's no negotiating with them. They're a force of nature that you have to endure or confront. And convenient that they crash up against each other and do so much canceling out.
I know, right? Yeah, I thought that was such a great way to get rid of most of Masima's bullshit. Very convenient.
And that's also morally sticky. Like, Perrin is in, dare I say it, like the moral crossroads of Twilight, like through this whole situation. He's just making complicated, morally gray decisions right and left because there is no good path forward. He's been forced by the pattern to navigate these things. Despite being the gentle giant who wants to cause no pain, the pattern's like, I'm sorry, but you need to cause pain. That's what I need your thread to do. So let's go. Let's create war. Let's create armies, and let's get you ready for the last battle, little bumpkin.
Oh, and I just want to address Super Sky, like was saying, replacing blame on the Shido as a monolith, and he's saying that, if you got rid of some of the leaders, maybe they could be better. And maybe, but the Shido recruit from people who specifically, especially the brotherless, fled from Rand's better way, right? These are people who couldn't stand what we consider the moral right way to do things.
Yeah, like 40% of the 100,000 spears they have are Meriden, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which, okay, you can argue that maybe they have legitimate reasons for fleeing, but
I feel like the Shido are the fake news, Aiel, and that they have all of the worst aspects of all of that.
It's like yes, at some point they were coerced into doing coerced, thank you, into doing this. But there's a certain willingness on their part to accept the facts, to accept that Couladin was the Dragon Reborn, to accept
So these are the MAGA Aiel.
Conspiracy theorists. Yeah, these are the MAGA Aiel. Yeah.
MAGA Aiel, 100%. They would rather, accept a loudmouth shouting fake news than accept difficult, uncomfortable truths about themselves and their people. They're 100%.
They're still contesting the last trip to Iridian.
Yeah.
Like there was those fake wise one electors, and like there was that.
That was only like a year ago.
Yeah, and the Meridine are basically the ones who ran, and they're like, the election is rigged, and we're going to run off and join the Shido.
Hashtag not my dragon.
Hashtag not my dragon.
Or not my Karakarn. Yeah.
Not my Karakarn.
I just need 11,780 more dragon tattoos. Yeah, no, it's which is, then that poses the other moral quagmire of like, what do you do with 100,000 people who have renounced a shared reality? Like, how do you bring them back? How do you kill them all? How do you balance their influence politically and militarily? Like, these are questions we get to wrestle with.
Yeah, in our real life, and it's alarming.
Yeah. When people are like, we are a mob with a chant and an alternative set of facts, and we want to murder you. We are actively screaming in broad daylight that we want to murder you in your homes. How are we supposed to react? That's what Perrin and the Shido and everyone or Perrin and the Shan-Chan and everyone are dealing with.
Yeah, I find the whole Shido and Aiel arc to be, uncomfortably a lens into the life that we're living right now.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
No, I don't like it either.
That implies that we need Shan-Chan in our equation, and I do not want to know who the Shan-Chan are.
No, that wasn't what I was implying at all.
MAGA, make Aiel great again. The Shido really are on that. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, because they just refuse to accept like the facts. Like they just have alternative facts and are just going to keep hyping each other up to stay in their silo and keep fighting everyone and having a fucking persecution complex about it. So yeah, on the one hand, if you take out the leaders, that can change a lot. There have to be consequences, and there are ringleaders who are duping the masses. But also, there is a cohesive momentum that has been created. That is, everyone's buying in, everyone's putting their little bit of energy into pushing that particular nonsense ball uphill.
And you know that there are plenty of them who know that Couladin wasn't the Karakarn and know it's all bullshit, but it's like they're all in their Shido identity. They can't leave that behind, or their friends and their families, and it's what they know, so they stick with it and they just continue on down.
And a lot of the leadership has always known it was a lie. Most of the leadership has always known it was a lie. Like, there's no one, like, there's a few people at, like, the second tier who actually believe it, but, like, everyone else, no.
Yeah. All of the wise ones know that Couladin didn't win the election. They all know.
Yeah. They all know. They're all lying through their teeth on the goddamn stand. And, yeah, ultimately, a remnant of a remnant tries to crawl back to, the good old waste. And it's just, I think it's too late for those, honestly. I think that they all die out. I don't think they even make it back to the waste.
Yeah, they provide horribly uncomfortable parallels, which I noticed during my last read through, and I was like, I don't like this. I don't like what I see. I don't like it at all.
No, Robert Jordan is not giving us an optimistic prescription for how this is going to go. At all. Not that he necessarily meant to, but I think the messiness of war, both internationally and domestically, is something that he's trying to present in all of its ugly messiness rather than giving us a fairy tale, because as he likes to tell us with his characters, heroes and stories don't have these sorts of problems or discomforts. It's all neat and tidy. And Robert Jordan's like, no, it's a fantasy story, but also it's real life and it's messy.
It's a shit show. It's all a shit show. So
always has been.
It really is. It really is.
Always has been, always will be.
Who's the Shido wise one who gets sacrificed? You remember her name?
Desane?
Desane.
Yeah. I was trying to make Desane be one of the like some Republican that got thrown under the bus at some point, like Paul Ryan or something like that. Yeah, John McCain. Yeah, there we go. The same as John McCain. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Tharava is definitely Mitch McConnell.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh God. She had this moment where she freezes. It's like I was just staring at that thing in the sky.
Yeah,
I swear.
Looks like my video's frozen, but that's okay. This is the end of the chapter anyway.
Yeah. If we want to get off of this incredibly depressing parallel and just read us out.
It's a little too accurate, yeah.
TC Traveler does say that Tharava has way more backbone than Mitch McConnell, and I have to agree.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was more of the power structure than the personality that I was comparing.
Mitch McConnell had some fucking stones to tell Obama he couldn't elect Supreme Court justice with more than a year left in his fucking term.
I mean, he was an old white man talking to a younger black man. I don't think he needed that many balls to say that.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, yeah, that's fair.
I was thinking she meant more backbone talking to, like, her own people.
Yeah.
In which case, she's not wrong. Yeah. Okay, you gonna do the readout?
Save us from this comparison, please.
3 days later, the carts returned from So Harbor, heavy laden, and Balor entered Perrin's tent with a tall, unshaven man wearing a dirty woolen coat and a sword that looked much better cared for. At first, Perrin did not recognize him behind an untrimmed month's growth of beard. Then he caught the man's scent. "I never expected to see you again," he said. Balor blinked, as much as a gasp of startlement from anyone else. Doubtless the bird-like man had been looking forward to presenting a surprise. "I've been searching for Magden," Talonvor said roughly, "but the Shido moved faster than I could. Master Balor says you know where she is." Balor gave the younger man a sharp look, but his voice remained as dry and emotionless as his scent. "Master Talonvor reached So Harbor just before I left, my lord. It was the merest chance that I encountered him, but perhaps a fortunate chance. He may have some allies for you. I will let him tell it." Talonvor frowned at his boots and said nothing. "Allies?" Perrin prompted. "Nothing less than an army will be much use, but I'll take any aid you can bring." Talonvor looked at Balor, who returned a half bow and a blandly encouraging smile. The unshaven man drew a deep breath. 15,000 Shan-Chan, near enough. Most are Terabonners, actually, but they ride under Shan-Chan banners, and they have at least a dozen Damane. His voice quickened with urgency, a need to finish before Perrin cut him off. "I know it's like taking help from the Dark One, but they're hunting the Shido too, and I'd take the Dark One's help to free Magden." For a moment, Perrin stared at the two men, Talonvor nervously thumbing his sword hilt, Balor like a sparrow waiting to see which way a cricket would hop. Shan-Chan and Damane. Yes, that would be like taking the Dark One's help. "Sit down and tell me about these Shan-Chan," he said.
Exciting non-sloggy chapter. Thank you so much, Morgan, for coming and helping us hash that out and go off on deep, deep esoteric rabbit hole tangents.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yes, always glad to do so. Thanks for having me on. This book has lots of issues, but it has some chapters that I just am always here for, and this is one of them.
It really is a great chapter.
And you guys will be done with it pretty soon.
Yeah, we are.
We are, what, 2 recordings away from being done, or is it 3?
I don't know. No, well, you can check the events tab in Discord. I have scheduled us up through tangents in that for people.
Yeah, so we have 2 book recordings left, and then tangents.
Wow.
But we will be finished with this book before the show ends, and then we're probably going to do show reactions, and then we may take a small break.
You guys are waiting until the show's totally done before you do your reactions?
It's spoilers way. It is the spoilers way. Yeah.
Right on. All right.
And having watched the first 4 episodes, I'm so happy we're deciding to do that. I'm having such a better time just watching it for its own sake and not engaging with it as a content creator.
Okay, you guys are doing reviews. You're not actually going to do reacts.
Yeah, we'll do like basically book episodes.
Oh, okay.
Right, like 2 hours of just talking
right on.
through
No,
what
that's
happened.
great. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
awesome.
honestly like I'm kind of on a Discord diet at this point. I really don't feel like being part of the discourse around it as it's coming out. I really just want to experience it on my own and then engage with discourse after I've had my feels. I'm being even more sacred about it than last time.
Even the little bit of interaction I've done, I've come away from watching the show super excited, and then I have done a small bit of online interaction, and that makes me feel immediately worse about the show. And it's amazing how much just watching it is so much better for me than engaging with the people who immediately point out the things that I'm like, oh, I guess I really was disappointed that blah, blah, blah wasn't in there. And then that's all I'm thinking about instead of how much I actually enjoyed the show. Because there are things missing from it that I wish were in there, but that's not what I want to be focusing on when I'm watching it. Because season 2 is significantly better than season 1 so far.
It's done.
Yeah, that's a safe thing to say at this point, is this is way better than season 1. Fuck. But yeah. I'm looking forward to processing it, knowing what happens at the end of episode 8 by the time we crack recording on episode 1.
So we're not giving anybody our first reactions to it. That's not what the spoiler crew here does.
You can go to my YouTube and watch my react videos. I'm just about to process my react video for episode 4, and then I'll get it uploaded tonight, and I'll be all caught up so I can record a react on Thursday.
Awesome.
Yay.
Just let me plug my content on your show.
No, definitely. Everyone go listen to Morgan's stuff.
And where would you find your channel?
It's just, Podcast of the Dragon on YouTube, and then you can find me wherever you find fine podcasts. Maybe a radio will put a link in the episode.
Always there will be a link in the episode description to Morgan's very excellent content. And I don't begrudge anyone who wants to engage in all the reactions. And I seriously, if that's how you want to engage with the show, that's great. If you're a content creator who's doing that, I super support it. I just am finding my limits this time rather than overrunning them aggressively in an effort to keep up with everyone. Because I want to be like my friends. But sometimes it's just, different floats for different goats.
You gotta do it how you gotta do it.
And we weren't sure how much that tide was rising in the beginning of season 1. I think we have a better concept of who's consuming what kind of content as we go into season 2.
Yeah. And it's yeah, there's just more predictability now. But yeah, I will say, as my very non-spoilery tease, I am very, very much enjoying myself. Way more than I was with season 1.
Agreed. Just so many more nods to the books, so many more direct quotes, so many more combining existing characters into a new third character rather than creating a new third character out of whole cloth. Or I should say combining characters into yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, we will be talking about that later this fall. Not quite sure how we're going to record it, but later.
I loved season 1. Like, I emotionally give season 1 a 7.5. I intellectually give it a 6.5, but I think this season is just off the hook. I love every second of it. I'm so happy. And I can't wait for Thursday. So,
though I'm sure I'll say the same thing about season 2 that I eventually came to decide about season 1. There's not enough.
I'm sure.
It's always true.
Yeah, I won't get to watch it Thursday night. I have actual things to do. I'll have to wait till... Oh, and then I'm doing things. Oh, fuck. I don't know when I'm going to get to watch it because I'm going away for the weekend. But yeah, Brandon's actually been enjoying it a bit more, I think. He seems more engaged and is asking me more questions. So he still is eye-rolling his way through it and just indulging me. But he seems less eye-rolly than he was with season 1.
Never is willing to sit down and watch it with me, And I had to watch episode 4 without her, and she came home and I was like, I already watched episode 4 because it came out and you weren't home. It's like, okay, well, let's watch it again.
Aw.
And I was like, normally in season 1, if I'd been like, I already watched that episode, she'd be like, okay, cool.
Nice. Yeah.
So there's that. Well, and also she's further along in the books. We just got past Moraine dumping Lanfear into the portal.
You've hit Fires of Heaven, the end?
We're at the end of Fires of Heaven. We're about to go through Nynaeve, capturing Mogadine.
Yes.
And taking her to the Battle of the Dream. So yeah, no, we got Ravine. We got the screen. Ravine.
Yeah. Then you have to go back and pick up Mogadine. Yeah.
And then you have to go back and pick up Mogadine, and then she shows up at the battle. So
good. You're in a good fun
but
part.
we're in that avalanche at the end, and yeah, because we drove down to see my parents, and so we had a 3-hour drive, so we were able to get through a chunk of it.
Nice.
My wife had listened to the first two, but she tried to listen to the audiobooks, but unfortunately Michael Kramer sounds like a friend of her father's that she knew when she was younger that she couldn't fucking stand. So she can't listen to the Michael Kramer Kate Reading books because she hates it, which I feel really bad about, but she likes the Rosamund Pike books. So she listened to the first one a couple times, but she's ADHD, so she forgets everything. And so she's listened to the second one once, and now she's on it again and wants to get through the third one before she watches season 2 with me. She watched season 1 a bunch and really liked it. So I'm just kind of waiting because I'm so ready for her to watch and enjoy.
I was really annoyed at first when they were re-releasing the audiobooks. And since then, I've heard a lot of things that make me not annoyed. But one thing that I've heard repeatedly is people listening to the books and being like, I do not like this man's voice. I've had multiple people who are like, oh, I decided to try the audiobooks just on your recommendation. And I do not like that man's voice. The audio quality is shit. The equipment they're using is trash. Oh my God, thank goodness there's this beautiful woman's voice that's actually of high quality production who I can stand. And it's that is the final piece of me being resentful that there's a second edition. Cause there are people who legitimately won't listen because reasons.
And legitimately, Michael Kramer made that in 96. And frankly, the versions I've heard aren't that good. He does sound like he's talking through a tin can. It's not his, the voices are not the same quality as the later books.
Honestly, the production quality on the Rosamund Pike books aren't great all the time. I think the audio editing, I think she peaked out a couple times. And so it's you can see that, but because of the work that she does with her acting, I know she, from what I was reading, she highlights in different colors the different voices, and she writes notes in the corners to do her tonal stuff. She does homework, and you can really tell the acting, and she can do things she can mimic Kate Fleetwood's voice really good and do stuff like that. So she can make Book Leandrin sound way better than Book Leandrin actually ever sounds, to where she's not show Leandrin quality ever, but she's good, she's great. So I really appreciate, no shade to Michael and Kate.
I hate that I love her version of it, right? Because I do have the loyalty to Michael Kramer and Kate Reading as much as anybody possibly could, right? In terms of what they did professionally, what they've done for me personally, all that.
Yeah, plus they're just wonderful people, and Michael can dance like a dream, and they're talented people.
And Kate can drink us all under the table. And
holy shit, can she?
Yes.
But they are the least resentful of all. We're out here being offended on their behalf, and they're like, bitch, have you seen Shakespeare plays?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Mike, that was Michael Kramer's exact quote of why would I get angry as an actor when somebody else does Shakespeare, right? We're both interpreting the original material.
Yeah, they don't need us to defend them.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?